This is my 150mm travel specialized Levo. Now this bike is a bit of a chameleon as to what it can do, where it can go and how it rides. From hitting the big gaps at the bike park to weaving in and out of the city traffic, this bike can do it all. So today I'm going to be showing you how to set your e-bike up to get the most out of it in just 1 week's worth of riding. There's many ways you can change the character of this bike, from the suspension settings to the tyre choice, but there's two very important parts of this bike, being the flip chip that is housed in the chainstay and the angle set that comes with this bike. Both of these are going to alter the geometry of this bike quite differently. And let's not forget the Mission Control app too. In Mission Control, you have so many features, things like the motor settings where you can control how much peak power you have or how much acceleration comes from your motor. You have a display which will show you such things as your watts, how many watt hours per kilometer you're using, your cadence, your range, all massively important for different riding scenarios. You can even use features such as micro tune and also a great feature called Smart Control, which will adjust your battery levels to ensure you get home. You can also tune this bike for its use with a heart rate monitor purely for fitness. Whoa. Now first on the list on a Monday morning is my commute to work. Now this is about a 30-mile round trip, mostly consisting of cycle paths and a little bit of road. Now commuting on your e-bike, great way of keeping fit and of course saving cash. Okay, so let's take a look at how I set this bike up for a little bit of commuting. As I mentioned earlier, this bike has adjustable geometry via the flip chip, so I could change that into the high setting to give me a more upright riding position, as I could also add a few spaces under my stem to raise that bar height. It's just going to make it a lot more comfortable. Tyres on this bike, well, are definitely going to be increasing the pressure to around 40 psi to make sure I have a fast rolling tyre. If I wanted to take that up another level, of course I could go to a semi-slick hard compound tyre. And then the suspension on this bike, well, I definitely like to firm it up a lot more than I would do for regular trail use. And again, if I wanted to take that to the next step, if I was riding on really smooth rides, I could of course lock it out. So how about the motor tune for commuting? Well, this bike has 3 different levels of assist already, but that micro tune feature is a great way of getting more range from your battery per kilometer. So for commuting, all I'm going to do is dial down the motor response levels of this bike. So that's how hard that motor accelerates as soon as you push the cranks, purely because I don't need it to be so aggressive for road work as I do for those off-road situations. Let's talk accessories then for the commute. Well, a set of mudguards on your bike is definitely essential, especially on the front. Now that does a great job of keeping all that muck off your face. And you can stick one on the back to stop all that water firing up onto your ass too. Now lights, definitely, if your return journey is going to be in the dark, a set of front and rear lights is definitely needed. A lock is definitely essential for keeping your pride and joy nice and safe, and you want a lock that fits inside your riding pack, of course, for carrying it. And talking to your riding packs, you want a bag that's going to contain those essentials too, a multi-tool, a way of fixing a broken chain, and of course a puncher. And I like to carry a spare set of waterproofs too if the weather was to change. Okay, I got a spare hour, so it's not really enough time to go and hit the trails, but it does give me enough time to go ride a little bit of skate park and some street. Skate park and street is a great way of getting out there, brushing up on your skills. It all helps next time you hit the trails. All I need today is going to be my bike, water bottle, and maybe a milkshake, and of course my GoPro to record all the action. So what setup do we run for riding street and skate park? Well, first up, tyre pressure. You want these pretty hard, say around 40 PSI. That way the tyre's gonna roll really fast and it's gonna give your rim a lot of protection against impact and makes it a lot more stable, especially when you put it under high pressure scenarios like spinning on the front wheel, things like that. You do not want soft tyres for this one. And the same thing you do not want soft is your suspension. There's some big hits going on when you ride in street and skate park. So just make sure the sag's set around 20% on the rear and about 10% up front. And lastly, the saddle is a prime area to get snagged up on, so you want that slammed down nice and low to make sure it doesn't get in the way, especially when you're falling off your bike and stepping off of it. Last thing you want to do is get snagged up in this. So how do we go about setting this motor up for a bit of street skate park trials action? Well, when I'm hitting the streets, I like to have two different settings, especially in that eco setting. I like to dial down my motor response so it's not super kind of lurchy forward. As soon as I apply pressure on the cranks, I don't want the bike to be firing forward uncontrollably. So I dial down that motor response, kind of make it more like a normal mountain bike. But on the other end of the scale, for those big stair set power climbs, I like to max everything out in turbo, 100% on everything to ensure I get the most power from my motor. So the accessories for hitting the street, your riding pack to carry those essentials. I'm going to be whipping off that front mud guard because there's no mud on the street. I have a multi-tool for making any adjustments, especially after you crash. You can normally tweak your bars or your stem. And lastly, a phone tripod is really good for catching all that Instagram action if you haven't got a friend with you. Today is all about trail riding and we've got a bit of snow for us, so things could be interesting. We've got about a 30-mile loop of some sweet single tracks, some descents, and of course some great climbs. It's all about getting out there exploring and getting some good flow going on in that dirt, or maybe snow. So set up for trail riding, well, one of the most important factors here for today is going to be grip and of course battery range. You want a comfortable riding position and you want geometry of the bike that's going to suit that all-round nature of your ride. Tyre-wise for this bike, I'll be running the stock tyres, probably pumped up at around 28 PSI. That's going to give me some great grip. And also for the climbs and the descents, I'll be switching between open and closed suspension and flicking that firmness lever on my rear shock. Trail riding is where I'll be using the Mission Control app to tweak my motor settings, record my ride, and potentially look at my results post-ride to record for future information to see how many watts I used versus the bike. I might even get a heart rate monitor on for fitness and upload that information to get into that nitty-gritty of the ride. And with those motor settings in Mission Control, well, I'm probably going to run them pretty much factory preset. Although if it gets super steep and technical, I might ramp that assist and that motor response up a little. And remember, the great thing about Mission Control is smart control. Now this is really cool. So if you're running low on battery, you can actually enter in your details of your remaining ride and the computer and the motor and the battery will make sure you get to your endpoint without a flat battery. Clever stuff, eh? And the accessories that I take for a trail ride, well, it's going to be my trusty backpack with all my kit in. I've got tools in there, I've got food in there, I've got stuff in there that's going to get me out of every eventuality out on the trail. And of course, if the trails are wet, I'm going to be running mud guards, probably front, maybe the rear. And of course, if I want to get a little bit more mileage out or the trails are a little bit more sedate, I could consider running clipless pedals. And if I'm out on a ride that I don't know where I'm going, of course I'm going to have my Garmin head unit on there to navigate me along the way without any fuss. Wow, that snow is pretty relentless and it's the weekend and we're here today at Windhill Bikepark and this place has it all from full-on rooty nastiness, smooth groomed trails and of course some massive jumps. So let's go and have a bit of fun. So accessories for my day at the bike park, well, I will be bringing my rucksack to keep all my stuff in at the trailhead. In there I've got my multi-tool, a shock pump, and of course my GoPro for recording all the action. Right, so bike park setup for your e-mountain bike. Well, there's a few different setups here depending on the type of riding you're doing. If you're hitting that full-on rooty nastiness on the downhill, you're gonna need a different setup to hitting those groom trails with those bigger jumps. So let's talk about both of those. So let's start off with tires. If you're hitting jumps, you definitely want your tires a bit harder. About 40 PSI, you'll see that tire rolling fast and be really predictable. On the flip side, if you're riding those rooty downhill trails, you want something a little bit softer. Probably around 30 PSI should see you good for most of that. Then the suspension on the bike. Again, if you're jumping, you want that firmer setup, front and rear on your bike. And then if you're riding that tech downhill rooty stuff, you want it around the normal 25-30% sag you would do for a trail ride. And lastly, I'm lucky enough to have adjustable geometry on this bike. So if I wanted to ride more of the downhill stuff, I'd set it in that low bottom bracket setting. That way it drops the BB and gives me really good handling when nailing those turns. Right, motor settings for the bike park. Well, they're pretty much going to be the same as a trail ride. The most important thing about being here at the bike park is getting in as many runs as possible. So I will be using eco and trail just to smash out as many runs as I can. Of course, if I'm just here for a short period, say for a power hour, I could just use the shuttle mode on mission control, meaning that motor's maxed out in every single setting, and I'm going to be flying up that hill as if using this bike as my personal shuttle. And of course, with that mission control app, I will still be running this in the background just to record all my rides and look at the times that I'm getting. And if I was to be training, I could of course use a heart rate monitor to monitor my fitness too. But the bike park, well, it's more about chilling and getting a style on. So there we have it, a week of entirely different styles of riding, from hitting 30-foot jumps to hitting 30-mile trail loops out on my e-bike. It's been great to mix all those disciplines up with a few subtle changes to my bike to make the most out of it. Get involved in the comments box down below the video to let us know how you set your bike up for those different disciplines, especially if I've left anything out. Give us a thumbs up if you've enjoyed it. Make sure you subscribe to us here on EMBN, and make sure you book those tickets to the Global Bike Festival too.